Beijing has just unleashed a seismic directive that's sending shockwaves through Silicon Valley. The Chinese government has ordered all state institutions and government-backed enterprises to completely remove Intel and AMD processors from their systems. In their place, homegrown alternatives from Huawei and Seismic. This isn't a gradual transition. It's an immediate mandate that could fundamentally alter the global technology landscape. The question now is whether America's chip empire can survive losing its second-largest market. What we're witnessing is an unprecedented escalation in the US-China technology conflict. Chinese authorities have issued formal instructions requiring government departments and state-controlled companies to eliminate American-designed processors from all critical infrastructure. The replacement chips come from domestic manufacturers, primarily Huawei's Kunpeng and Ascend series, alongside semiconductors produced by Seismic, China's leading foundry. This policy reversal is striking. For years, China's digital backbone ran largely on Intel's Xeon processors. Government data centers, banking systems, telecommunications networks, and even military infrastructure depended on American silicon. But sustained US sanctions against Chinese tech firms like Huawei and Seismic have pushed Beijing to retaliate. Now the tables have turned, and American corporations are facing exclusion. The scope is vast. The directive extends from federal ministries down to provincial governments. State-owned banks, energy companies, and telecommunications providers must strip out foreign processors. Beyond hardware, American software from companies like Microsoft and Oracle faces similar scrutiny, with Chinese alternatives being deployed across government systems. For Intel, the financial impact is catastrophic. China represented over a quarter of the company's global revenue, approximately $15 billion annually. That market is now evaporating. Intel's stock has crashed, erasing nearly $100 billion in market value within days. Investors understand this isn't merely lost sales. It's a permanent restructuring of global semiconductor supply chains. The rise of Huawei and Seismic from underdogs to credible Intel competitors seemed improbable just years ago, but 2025 tells a different story. When Washington blacklisted Huawei in 2019, the company faced an existential crisis. Cut off from American chip suppliers, Huawei made a decisive pivot. It poured resources into HiSilicon, its semiconductor design arm, developing the Kunpeng server processors and Ascend AI accelerators. These aren't makeshift substitutes. They're legitimate alternatives delivering competitive performance and efficiency. State support proved crucial. Beijing channeled billions into research and development, subsidizing Huawei's transformation. Today, Chinese government servers running Kunpeng processors aren't merely symbolic gestures. They're operational at scale across the nation. But designing chips is only half the equation. Manufacturing them requires advanced foundries, which brings us to Seismic. China's premier semiconductor manufacturer has closed significant ground on industry leaders like TSMC and Samsung. While not yet matching the most cutting-edge processes, Seismic's N+1 and N+2 production nodes deliver performance comparable to 7-nanometer technology. Perhaps most remarkably, Seismic recently produced a Huawei-designed 7-nanometer chip without using extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, equipment banned from export to China. This achievement stunned industry observers and demonstrated that innovation can find paths around restrictions. The combination is powerful. Huawei designs the chips, Seismic manufactures them, and together they're creating a vertically integrated Chinese supply chain. Adding another dimension, Chinese firms are increasingly adopting the open-source RISC-V architecture, reducing reliance on the x86 standard dominated by Intel and AMD. With government mandates, deep talent pools, and substantial funding, China is executing a complete overhaul of its technology infrastructure. The pace has exceeded many Western predictions. The numbers paint a grim picture for Intel. In 2024, the company generated roughly $54 billion in revenue. China accounted for 27%, nearly $15 billion. With Beijing's mandate now in effect, that income stream is vanishing. Consider the breadth. China's state-owned enterprises span telecommunications giants like China Mobile, major financial institutions, energy corporations, defense contractors, and government cloud platforms. All traditionally relied on Intel processors for mission-critical operations, servers, databases, AI workloads, data centers. That entire demand base is shifting to domestic suppliers. This isn't a temporary disruption. Analysts project Intel could forfeit $9 to $12 billion annually over the next 3 years from direct Chinese government sales alone. The losses may extend further as private Chinese companies align with government preferences to avoid political complications. The market responded brutally. Intel's stock plunged over 20% in days, obliterating approximately $100 billion in market capitalization. For shareholders, it's a harsh lesson. Geopolitics now drives markets as powerfully as quarterly earnings. Recovery looks challenging. Intel's ambitious expansion plans, including massive fabrication facilities in Ohio and Europe, aim to reduce Asian dependency. But these plants won't reach full production until 2026 at the earliest. Meanwhile, competitors are advancing. AMD and Nvidia are capturing market share, while ARM-based alternatives gain momentum. Perhaps most damaging, Intel is trailing in artificial intelligence, the industry's hottest sector. Nvidia dominates AI training with its H100 GPUs, AMD pushes forward with MI300 accelerators, and Intel's Gaudi processors lag far behind. Losing Chinese revenue eliminates funding. Intel desperately needs to accelerate innovation in these critical areas. The harsh reality, without China, Intel must reinvent itself faster than ever, or risk permanent decline. Intel's crisis represents more than corporate trouble. It's a strategic alarm for the United States. As China disconnects from American semiconductors and embraces domestic technology, the global balance of chip industry power is shifting with profound implications for national security and economic competitiveness. For decades, America dominated semiconductors. Intel embodied that leadership, the company that put silicon in Silicon Valley. But as China constructs its own end-to-end chip ecosystem, from Huawei's design work through SMIC's manufacturing to deployment in government systems, American dominance faces genuine challenge. Washington is paying attention. The CHIPS Act allocated billions to restore semiconductor manufacturing on American soil, but implementation is slow. While TSMC and Intel construct fabrication plants in Arizona and Ohio, meaningful production remains years away. China, meanwhile, is deploying functional processors today, despite heavy sanctions. Even more troubling is China's adaptation under pressure. U.S. export controls intended to cripple Huawei and SMIC have instead accelerated domestic innovation. By prioritizing secure and controllable supply chains, China found workarounds, leveraging older deep ultraviolet lithography equipment and embracing open-source architectures like RISC-V. If current trends continue, China won't simply achieve self-sufficiency. It could become a chip technology exporter, offering developing nations an alternative to Western suppliers. That represents a geopolitical shift with far-reaching consequences. Pressure builds in Washington. Some lawmakers demand tighter restrictions, including secondary sanctions on companies helping China manufacture advanced semiconductors. Others argue America must emphasize innovation over blockades. The semiconductor competition has become a central front in the new technological Cold War. Intel, once a cornerstone of U.S. tech power, now finds itself wounded, not by superior competition, but by geopolitical forces. If America wants to preserve leadership, it must rethink strategy. Not merely defend existing advantages, but create what comes next. Intel's $100 billion wipeout is more than a dramatic headline. It's a signal flare. The global technology landscape is being redrawn, and everyone must pay attention. Short-term expectations, continued market volatility. Intel's leadership faces intense pressure to diversify rapidly. Chinese firms like Huawei and Seismic will likely see funding surges and growing international interest. Developing countries, particularly across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, may increasingly explore Chinese chip solutions as affordable alternatives to American technology. The deeper narrative concerns resilience. China's success building a complete chip ecosystem despite sanctions marks a milestone. It demonstrates that global tech power is no longer unipolar, and the semiconductor war is just beginning. For the United States, this is a wake-up call. Innovation, supply chain sovereignty, and global partnerships will define the next decade of technology leadership. The companies that navigate this transition successfully, or fail to adapt, will shape not just markets, but the future of global power itself. The semiconductor war has entered a new phase, and the outcome remains far from certain.